Hi everybody, welcome to this week's Who's Who Storytime. And this week we're only going to talk about one person, but that one person is awesome. His name is Ernie Barnes, and he was a professional football player and a professional artist. And he took real life situations like a football game or the Olympics or dancing, and he made these beautiful paintings that became world famous in the 1960s and the 1970s. And so we're going to read a book about him today, and that book is called Between the Lines: How Ernie Barnes Went from the Football Field to the Art Gallery. It was written by Sandra Neal Wallace, and it was illustrated by Brian Collier. We're going to look at the back of the book because why not? In the back of the book, there's tons of stuff in this one. So let's see. So there is a historical note. So the historical note is a biography about Ernie Barnes with a picture of his real life work. There is an author's note. So Sandra Neal Wallace wrote a note about how she discovered or how she found out more about Ernie Barnes's artwork. And then we have Brian Collier's illustrator's note, and he wrote about how he met Ernie Barnes. So these two people are connected, and that explains why they wrote this book and illustrated this book. On the next page, we have to learn more. So these are some sources that the author recommends we read. There's a website, there are videos, there's a movie, places where you can see Ernie Barnes's paintings. So these are places where the paintings are hung up, so different museums. There's the African American Museum in Philadelphia, the California African American Museum, in Los Angeles, Hilbert Museum of California Art in Orange, California, Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio, and the American Sport Art Museum and Archives in Daphne, Alabama. And this is new actually. This is something that we haven't discussed before. In the back of some nonfiction books, especially as you get older, nonfiction writers will write quotes, and sometimes those quotes are made up. Sometimes that's what they think the person said, but other times the quotes are real and they come from somewhere. And to put that in a book, you have to write where you got it from. So all of these are where they got the quotes from. And that's how you know it's a good nonfiction book, isn't that they didn't really make up the quotes, they got the quotes from somewhere. And then we have additional sources, even more stuff that you can read about Ernie Barnes, and an acknowledgement page, which is a page where authors and illustrators thank the people who helped them make this book. And that's the back of the book. So let's read Between the Lines. Ernest loved the North Carolina rain. He waited for the backyard to turn into mud. Painting mud. Then Ernest found a stick and painted in the slippery soil. He drew straight lines and curved lines, loop lines and cross lines, lines that kept moving past his father's new picket fence and onto Willard Street. The neighbors wondered what Ernest was painting. They followed the lines to see where they led. Mama saw how Ernest loved to paint, but in the segregated South, she did not feel welcome in the art museum. So on sunny days, she brought Ernest with her to work. Mama was a housekeeper for a lawyer in Durham's white section. Ernest hadn't known anyone with a library until Mr. Fuller. The room smelled of leather books and mahogany frames that Mama polished. Ernest stared at the beautiful paintings in the frames. They told stories without words. Ernest had trouble with words. Quiet and shy, he rarely spoke. He didn't know what to say when kids from the neighborhood picked on him, and he wouldn't fight back. Instead, he hurried home and he painted. When Ernest grew too old to paint mud, he carried a sketchbook. The neighbors wondered what Ernest was drawing. He drew the junk man peddling hubcaps, families walking home from church, the old man snoring on the green sofa in the vacant lot while the kids played football. In the summer of 1951, most kids in Ernest's neighborhood dreamed of being professional athletes. "Hey man," they'd say, "what did Maze do today?" Ernest didn't want to play baseball or football. His hands were drawing hands. Ernest grew to be 6'3". The football coach at Hillside High wanted him to be on the team. Ernest told the coach his mama wouldn't let him play. One afternoon, when Ernest came home from school, he found the coach in the kitchen eating Mama's cooking. On the table was a donation for Mama's church. Ernest knew his drawing hands would soon be playing for the Hornets. Coach made him an offensive lineman. Ernest played center and became captain of the team. Ernest was so good at blocking that college scouts watched him play. He was offered 26 scholarships. Ernest chose North Carolina College at Durham, an all-black university across the street from Hillside High. He studied art and he played football. In his first year of college, the civil rights movement pushed for greater freedom for African Americans. Now, Ernest and his class could visit the museum. Ernest searched for paintings of people like him. He didn't see any. He had to find the words to ask the tour guide an important question. Ernest moved closer, gathering the words in his head. "Where are the paintings by Black artists?" he asked. Surprised by Ernest's question, the tour guide paused. "Your people don't express themselves in that way," she said. Ernest knew they did. His teacher had shown slides of artwork by Henry O. Tanner, Edmonia Lewis, and Palmer Hayden. But what would Ernest paint? His canvas stayed blank. His art teacher, Mr. Wilson, drove Ernest through the neighborhood. Inside the homes, Ernest knew the rhythm of laughter from his father's ragtime piano and the hard times. Ernest and Mr. Wilson yanked up a shoe stuck in the muddy walkway, a shoe with a story to be painted about hard times. "Art is all around you," Mr. Wilson told Ernest. "Use what you see." You catch my drift? Thinking about what Mr. Wilson had said, Ernest looked around his neighborhood. It no longer appeared ordinary. In the movement of every football play, in the explosion of a kickoff, in the swivel and swerves of game action, he saw beauty. He found what to paint. "Who is going to feed you if you become a painter?" asked Ernest's father. Ernest wasn't sure. In his senior year of college, National Football League scouts came to watch Ernest play. "We are going to draft you," they told him, but he didn't think they were serious. He had other plans. On draft day in 1959, Ernest waited in Mama's kitchen the whole day. No telegram came. In the morning, Ernest spotted his name in the newspaper. He ran outside to tell Mama. "I'm going to be in the pros," he shouted. Ernest would earn a living playing football for the Baltimore Colts. A few weeks later, Ernest rode a bus to watch the Colts play in the NFL championship game. He heard the thwack of tangled linemen butting shoulders on the field. He saw the sweaty faces of his new team who sat shoulder to shoulder on the bench. Players lunged forward, itching to play. Back home, the sidelines images still swirled in Ernest's mind. Jersey numbers bruising cobalt blue, referee calls roaring crimson red, sharp shoulders draped in goalpost white. Everything was so clear that Ernest didn't draw it in his sketchbook. He stretched out a canvas, reached for a palette knife, and painted quickly before the image had disappeared from his mind. He created his first football painting. He called it The Bench. Ernest decided that he'd never part with it. That summer, Ernest carried the painting to the Colts training camp. A reporter caught sight of it and wrote about it in the newspaper. He called Ernest Ernie, and the name stuck. On the last day of training camp, he was cut from the team. "You have everything but experience," the coach told Ernie. The new American Football League picked up Ernie's contract. Crash, bang, boom! Ernie's drawing hands hauled down his opponents every Sunday. His spike-bottomed cleats drew lines in the muddy field, but Ernie's sketchbook remained empty. In a magazine, Ernie read, "I Am a Negro" by Paul R. Williams. Williams wrote, "Real emancipation lies in your own intellectual effort." Ernie did not want to take his freedom for granted. He thought about his wish to be an artist. Ernie longed to paint, but his fingers were too swollen from blocking. When Ernie broke his hand in a game, a cast was put on so that he could still play. Even so, the coach dropped Ernie from the team. A want ad in the newspaper caught Ernie's attention. "Good salary guaranteed," it read, but there was no guarantee as a door-to-door salesman. He challenged himself to learn 8 new words a day. With every doorbell he rang and each door knocker he knocked, Ernie added more words to his list. He sold brushes and cosmetics. Then he told his customers why he wanted to be an artist, and they listened. Playing football earned more money than selling brushes. So after his hand healed, Ernie joined another team. He tucked a stubby pencil and a small notepad into his football socks. During timeouts, he scribbled notes about what he saw on the line of scrimmage, nicknamed the pit. He saw players clawing, scrapping, reaching, fighting to win. With his swollen hands, Ernie drew lines, making them stretch even farther and farther. Each time the coach caught Ernie sketching, he fined him $50. Ernie kept drawing. One time when he reached for his notepad, it was gone. He watched the pieces of paper floating above the field in the wind. "Hey, Barnes," the coach yelled. You could be great if only you would get that art out of your head." In the last game of the 1964 season, it rained. The field turned into mud. Painting mud. Ernie studied the uniforms covered in muddy brown. Linemen surging, blocking steely blue, clashing bodies stinging bloody scarlet. He followed the rain up to the brooding sky, listening to the roar in the stadium. He imagined the players as gladiators in a coliseum wearing coats of armor, fighting for their lives. Ernie had to paint the story. After the game, he told his coach he was finished playing football. With no money for rent, Ernie painted on the stoop outside a Los Angeles motel room. He pawned watches and art books for food. He worried. Would anyone buy his paintings? Ernie needed a game plan to sell his artwork. Leafing through a magazine, Ernie read a letter written by the famous painter, Vincent van Gogh. "I have a lot of work to do, but I still have the firm hope to succeed," Van Gogh had written. Encouraged by Van Gogh's words, Ernie came up with a brilliant game plan. He gathered his paintings and carried them to a meeting for the owners of the American Football League. Ernie tapped on the microphone to get their attention. "I want to become the official artist for the American Football League," he began. Someone asked Ernie a question. "When can you come to New York and bring your paintings with you?" It was Sonny Werblin, owner of the New York Jets. Sonny offered Ernie a football player's salary, but he didn't want Ernie to play. He wanted him to paint. Then Ernie would have his own show in a New York gallery. Day after day, Ernie painted. One night, Mama called. Ernie's father was very sick. Ernie drove his U-Haul full of paintings to Willard Street. He wanted to go home to see his father one last time. In the backyard, the fence his father had built sagged, a withered gray. Ernie leaned his paintings against it. It was perfect, Ernie decided. Ernie framed his paintings with pieces of his father's fence and drove back to New York City. On the opening night of Ernie's show, the gallery buzzed with activity. Visitors marveled at what Ernie had painted. A woman stuck red "sold" stickers next to the drawings and paintings. The bench, Ernie's first football painting, was not for sale. Ernie kept that as his own. For years afterward, Ernie's drawing hands painted stories. Celebrities, art lovers, and athletes pushed close to admire his paintings in galleries and museums across the country. One day, school children came to visit the museum in North Carolina. They asked to see paintings by African American artists. The tour guide showed them the newest exhibit. The artist was Ernie Barnes! They saw paintings of flowers growing in cracked sidewalks. They saw football players sparring like gladiators, their hopeful hands reaching for the ball. They saw dancers painted in bright dresses and blue jeans swaying to the rhythm of saxophones glinting gold. In Ernie's paintings, they saw hope. They saw struggle. They saw beauty. And that's the end of Between the Lines. So I'm gonna end this story time a little differently. I'm gonna put some of Ernie Barnes' paintings after we finish, and you can watch till the end to see some of his amazing paintings that are hanging in museums today. Okay, so thank you very much for coming to this week's Who's Who Story Time, and I hope to see you next week. Bye, enjoy the paintings.